Good afternoon. Yes, if you could find your seat. For those of you that I may not have met, my name is Cassandra Mate, and I'm the proud president and CEO of Visit Orlando. Happy to be sharing the stage with my friend D.T. Minnick, the president and CEO of Experience Kissimmee. I think this is a historical moment. I think most of my partners, you know that one of my top priorities has been partnerships through my first year, and this has become a great partnership. We have the honor to actually serve on the U.S. Travel Association board, and so DT and I have known each other for several years. So when I became a Floridian and we were in the same region, we just thought there are some awesome opportunities to promote and partner together to sell this region. And so this is just one product of that, and I think you're gonna really enjoy the update from Tori Barnes with U.S. Travel. But again, welcome. I do wanna acknowledge we have elected officials both from Orange County and Osceola County that we work with each and every day, and we really want to say thank you for your support and what you do in policy making. So if you are an elected official, please stand and let's all recognize. You will have an opportunity to network with our elected officials as well as one another. Following this, we're going to have a reception at the back of the room. DT, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Cassandra. And before we get started, I just want to say what a joy it has been to work with Cassandra since she arrived here from San Antonio. And she really gets it. It's about regionalism, it's about partnerships, and she's just amazing at that. And February 1st is right around the corner, and that's her 1-year anniversary of being here in Central Florida and the head of Visit Orlando. So thank you. We all need to raise a glass at the reception to Cassandra.
Thank you.
I have the honor of introducing our speaker, Tori Barnes, and she's amazing. And I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but I'm sure there's some of you in the audience, I'm looking around, that remember the Schoolhouse Rocks when we were little kids and we watched cartoons every Saturday morning. And remember the thing, I'm just a bill up on Capitol Hill type thing?
Yes.
Well, Tori is my Schoolhouse Rocks, because if I have a question about what's going on up on the Hill or what's happening with policy making, I call Tori and she always has the answer. And the other good thing about Tori is she can explain it to me, not in a lawyerly way or anything, but as little old DT from Kissimmee can understand. So I think you're really going to enjoy the program. Tori is the Executive Vice President of Public Affairs for U.S. Travel, where she leads our industry efforts on the national level in Washington. She has spent over 20 years as an advocate on Capitol Hill and as a corporate executive. She joined U.S. Travel almost 5 years ago and has really championed the critical initiatives and issues for the travel and tourism industry. And most importantly, has helped lead efforts to get relief from Congress through the pandemic. She has won many accolades for her work, including being named the Hill's top lobbyist for 4 years in a row. This is amazing for her to be named that when she's up against the auto industry and the retail industry and every other industry you can think that has associations and lobbyists in DC. For her to be named in the top category and the top lobbyist for 4 years in a row is amazing. So without further ado, Cassandra and I would love to welcome Tori to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that very warm welcome, and good afternoon to all of you. I'm so pleased to be here in Orlando today in person. I can't underscore again how important it is for us to be meeting face to face, and just a huge special thanks and kudos to all of the hard work that Cassandra and DT do on behalf of you all across the country by being board members and really advocates for the work that you all do. We help help to amplify that, but with having Cassandra and DT as part of our organization as board members and very thoughtful, engaged members, it really makes a difference for the community here. And by having this in-person meeting today, it really is a great demonstration of what we need to see more across the country. We need to see this, and you all are setting this great example here, so thank you, and thank you for being here. For those who may be less aware, U.S. Travel Association is the industry's voice, your voice really, in Washington as an advocate for policies, programs to increase travel to and within the United States. And we focus really on three primary areas: domestic leisure, business travel, as well as international inbound travel. And I know all three of those are so critical to the work here in Florida. Both Visit Orlando and Experience Kissimmee are very actively valued members of our board, as I mentioned. And I think what's really important is that so many folks here in your community, the suppliers, the hotels, the attractions, so much of what you all have to offer is what is so great about this industry. And again, having that representation at our national level is so awesome, and we love working with you all. I also have the pleasure to work alongside Roger Dow, who I'm sure many of you have heard about. He's our president and CEO, and he's really been a lifelong advocate, again, for the travel industry, and it's been great to learn so much from him, and I think that he's also a Floridian and very much values all of this contribution. So in my previous professional life as an advocate for the U.S. automobile industry, it really prepared me to help to navigate the challenges that this industry's faced in the past couple of years. We are clearly emerging from steep pandemic losses, and I have no doubt that we will come back stronger on the other side. And as the pandemic began to take hold in the first half of 2020, our efforts were squarely focused on accessing federal relief to help travel businesses, large and small, destination marketing organizations, and others, because we know how important it was for this industry to survive, to keep the lights on so that recovery could begin. U.S. Travel and our members were successful in working with lawmakers to include relief for this hard-hit industry. And through direct advocacy, we expressed the needs among our industry and workforce. 65% of all jobs lost in the pandemic were supported by travel and tourism previously. While the travel industry lost a staggering $730 billion in travel expenditures since March 2020, we know we can grow that back. Legislative solutions through the CARES Act, ARP, and others have helped to stand up this industry, and we're very grateful to our industry's champions in Congress who recognize the role of travel in the larger economy. We saw what happened when the world stopped traveling, and we know that that is a critical part of our U.S. economy. Nearly 9 in 10 of our U.S. travel members received some amount of federal funding, reaching almost $500 million from all of these programs like PPP, the Employee Retention Tax Credit, local ARPA funds, and more. And we know that this has been a lifeline for travel businesses, destinations, states, large and small. U.S. Travel was also helped to band together major businesses and destinations, and we had a huge group of folks from here in Florida to get together to remind Americans about the joys of travel through our Let's Go There campaign that really helped to revive domestic leisure. The excitement of planning a trip or a getaway through the Let's Go There campaign really helped to keep travel top of mind when lockdowns were so prevalent in most of the country. Simultaneously, we were dealing with an extended closure of U.S. borders to many of our top inbound markets and pressing the government for a plan and a timeline to safely reopen our borders. When we were together, and Cassandra and DT were both there with us in Las Vegas for IPW this fall, the White House coordinated a very well-timed announcement that U.S. air borders would finally reopen last November. It's a moment that we'll never forget and one that we fought very, very hard for. It's pretty clear that nothing, and I mean nothing, can keep our U.S. travel industry down. We've faced many moments of adversity in the past, and we always emerge stronger than we were before. Here's a brief video that's a good reminder of the road that we're on together and where it's taking us in the months ahead. Can we roll the video, please?
Here's a headline we haven't heard in over a year. Travel is at a pandemic peak.
The industry has come together.
Travel is returning far faster than most experts predicted.
The United States finally opening its borders.
It's a great day for the travel industry and for our economy.
So let's look forward. While domestic leisure spending has largely recovered to its pre-pandemic peak, economists estimate that domestic business travel and international inbound travel won't fully recover until 2024, and that's just far too long. The reality is that recovery across the travel industry has been incredibly uneven, and more must be done to accelerate the return of international travel and business meetings and events. Florida in particular has fared far better than many other regions in the U.S., and in order to rebuild the travel workforce, which supported 1 in 10 U.S. jobs pre-pandemic, we must see an even recovery in every sector and every location throughout our country. So let me touch just a minute on some of our near-term priorities. Federal policies are necessary to ensure that our industry can continue its recovery. U.S. Travel is advocating for 3 immediate priorities to restore jobs, reinvigorate communities, and businesses. 1, we're seeking to pass the Restoring Brand USA Act, our nation's destination marketing organization, to bring international travelers here. We're also looking at targeted tax stimulus to restore spending on business travel, live entertainment, and in-person events. And finally, we're looking at additional funding for relief grants to severely impacted travel businesses that either haven't been eligible or haven't gotten the funds that they need. These priorities have been endorsed by more than 600 travel industry organizations in a letter that was sent to Congress just last week. A critically important step in showing lawmakers that needs remain from coast to coast and that the role that they can help play to drive demand for travel and rebuild millions of lost travel jobs won't only help the industry, but it will help the U.S. economy. While we focus on these efforts with the legislative branch, we continue to engage other issues on vital importance, such as engaging and encouraging everyone to think about the right layered approach to health and safety for them, ending the era of travel restrictions and moving to a risk-based approach to managing the virus, as well as advancing policies that can help the U.S. industry be more sustainable and inclusive. From a long-term vision standpoint, as you saw in the video, we've cast a vision that extends far beyond the pandemic. The U.S. Travel Association is positioning our industry to emerge from the pandemic more dynamic, more globally competitive, and more innovative than we've ever been before. The adversity of the past 2 years has produced advancements that will enable a more seamless and secure, safe experience for years to come. And we want to make sure that we as an industry are well equipped to meet the needs of the future. We are seeing rapidly evolving technology and issues that span sustainability, mobility, and beyond. We have a robust policy agenda that will enable travel to continue growing in the months and decades to come. Some key areas of focus that we're really digging into include issues related to the workforce and how to restore our jobs, travel facilitation and the opportunity to create a more seamless and secure travel experience, the steps that we can take as an industry working together with the transportation and technology sectors to really contemplate how the future of travel mobility will impact the traveler. And sustainability can and must be a part of the fundamental way that our industry responds responsibly to growth in the industry. And then finally, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is critical to creating a travel industry that really prioritizes everyone. First and foremost, I'll talk about workforce. We need to get people back to work. If we are going to be able to even recover evenly across all segments of travel, we know that we have to be back. International and business travel is so important to creating that stability. There are currently 11 million jobs open, with a great number of them in our industry. But even as the economy recovers, jobs remain open, and 1 in 7 in our industry are open, which is more than any other. The continued restrictions and caps on temporary H-2B visas have considerably exacerbated our ability to rebuild the workforce and our growing travel demand. And it's an issue that is well known to many of you here in this room. The access to temporary qualified workers is critical to staffing Florida resorts, theme parks, visitor sites, and you all are very dependent on a very deep seasonal workforce that are unable to come here right now. To address this issue, U.S. Travel is working with Congress, the State Department, and the Department of Homeland Security to press for a higher cap on H-2B visas as well as J-1 visas. And we're also advocating for faster visa processing times for low-risk applicants. Another key area of focus for the association is facilitation. We want to improve the overall traveler experience from curbside to cruising altitude. How do we do this? We lean into new technologies. We are calling on the federal government to expand biometric technology at America's airports. Expanding trusted traveler programs and increasing TSA and CBP staffing are also critical to the seamless travel experience. We cannot meet the rising need for demand of travel once it does return to full force across all sectors if we can't adequately staff the airport experience. And when we look to international travel, one of the biggest facilitation challenges is the excessive wait times for visa processing. Markets that we rely on for visitation, they can't come here. A lot of those borders restrictions are actually a de facto border restriction because we're seeing wait times of almost a year from countries like Brazil for folks to be able to get a visa to come to the US. That's hugely problematic and something that we're highly engaged in conversations with the federal government on. These issues can have potential legislative solutions, but more than anything, we need a whole of government approach to tackle some of the biggest issues that are facing our industry. We also have an opportunity to look with fresh eyes at a vision that can really look at the future of this facilitation. One of the things that I've always been looking at and talking about as we've seen a lot of these restrictions come up as a result of the pandemic is if you look at the lines at TSA, 20 years later, how many folks are still taking their shoes off to go through security? There's a better way, and we must find it now. It's something that we've got to start to think about how to tackle. The future of travel mobility is also our next real opportunity. In the future of travel mobility and how technology, transportation, and travel can really work together to reshape the way the traveler experience becomes not only more sustainable, but more possible. We held the first ever Future of Travel Mobility event last October in Washington, and we're going to continue to raise the profile of this issue at moments throughout this year and over the next decade. If I could please cue that video.
Well, it's clear to me that travel and transportation are going through enormous change. The 2020s will be characterized by changes that I think will be as swift and as profound in their effects as anything we've seen since perhaps the 1950s or even earlier in the 20th century.
There's never been a more important time or a better time to invest in this industry's future.
Pandemic can be a portal. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do things differently.
The facilitation of travel is actually a core mission within the Department of Homeland Security.
Our goal is to help build an industry that's even better than before the crisis. one that's more environmentally sustainable, more seamless and secure, more responsive to travelers' expectations, and constantly pushing the edge of innovation.
As we move faster, we move farther. And the choices that we make today, the infrastructure we choose to build today, is going to echo long into the future. So we have to ensure that we're getting and making the correct decisions.
And it's incredibly exciting. I think we're in the new roaring 20s. There are a lot of companies getting created. You know, the world we're going to live in 10 years from now, from an ability to get around the planet perspective, is going to be so much better than it is today.
This is a magical moment when we have the technologies and we have the need.
We have seen an incredible demand shift from corporate customers, from associations, from individual travelers, understanding their role in driving sustainability in their travel experiences.
It is an unbelievably exciting time. In just the past year, we've seen an incredible increase in commitments across the industry, across the automaker industry.
We're going to provide up to 10 charging stations for every one of our over 4,000 dealers across the country. The most challenging things we have, and the things I think we'll be most proud of, is providing accessibility for people, everybody, for electric vehicles.
There are charging deserts that do exist. We need to acknowledge that, and they are in urban areas and rural areas.
Vision of the future, we want to make sure that we're enabling that full ecosystem of charging and making it possible for people to seamlessly include charging in their lifestyle, rather than have to think about where am I charging. And that really changes, I think, the perception on range anxiety.
We want to help our states and our counties and municipalities to be able to have the availability of charging stations.
We really do need to own and address and partner on the solutions that are going to decarbonize travel at large.
Now, if you just raise the price of input fuel by 4 or 6x, you suddenly start getting back into a world where flying becomes the privy of wealthier communities, and that has real equity issues to consider.
And so we need to find new sources of energy, sustainable aviation fuels being the big one that we're pushing hard for today, to find ways to continue to reduce our footprint and makes people feel that they're not just having to choose between seeing the world and saving the world. We can do both.
Biometrics and ticketless travel, quicker access through into the secure area of airports is critically important from a security standpoint.
And ultimately, biometrics, the ability to know who the person is who's boarding the flight, keeps us all more safe and secure.
This is an opportunity for Congress to be a little innovative in how they're looking at how transportation should move forward.
What we're talking about is informed consent of the travel, having opt-in processes.
You face reality, you face the hard facts, but you know that there's a reason why you're there, and that purpose is to bring the world together.
So you can see from this video, which is this event was the first of a decade's worth of conversations that we're planning to have around the intersection of travel, transportation, and technology, because it's critical that travel is at the table with as these innovations come to life. As we see automakers set all-electric vehicle goals, as we look at seamless and secure environments, as we look at sustainable aviation fuels, we need to be a part of that conversation so that we can have the governmental programs, the private sector involved in a way that can actually optimize the experience for the traveler and have that be at the core of the work that we do. So we will continue to look at this not just in the context of air travel, but really a holistic view across bridges, ports, highways, roads, destinations. How do we look at reimagining our cities? When we have all electric fleets or autonomous vehicle fleets, what does that mean for our cities and how we get around? There's a huge opportunity as long as we're part of that conversation, and that's what we're doing in Washington. Again, emerging technologies that we saw in the video and that were part of the conversation for the Future of Travel Mobility event included the Hyperloop and high-speed rail, which can really transform the way folks get through this area. I was just on I-94 or I-4, and we had a crash. But if you got the Hyperloop and you've got other ways to travel, you can broaden the scope. You can get places faster. You can make it better for the traveler, and that's going to be so critical to the future of our industry. Another important opportunity for the future of travel is sustainability. As Ed Bastian said, we don't have to choose between saving the planet and seeing the world. There are many viable solutions that our industry can do to be more sustainable, while also ensuring that customers can continue to travel and explore Florida and America. And as we've seen the industry embrace these practices during the pandemic, large corporations, travel businesses have set aggressive climate goals, and all across the industry, we are more conscientious than ever of the environmental impact of travel. But this means driving leadership. What does this mean for electric vehicle infrastructure, for sustainable aviation fuels, for preserving our national parks, and more? Travelers want sustainable options, and with these continued advancements in policy and technology, we can not only see sustainability as a means to improve the travel experience, but we can also ensure being environmentally responsible is a priority across all components of the whole travel ecosystem. Another area that is a true focus for U.S. travel is diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the end of last year, U.S. Travel launched a new partnership with Tourism Diversity Matters, which will enable us to work together to highlight the importance of expanding our thinking, our resources, and our opportunities to increase diversity and upward mobility throughout the industry. We live in one of the most diverse countries in the world. Our industry should reflect that. And because our industry inherently brings people together and lifts people up, we should be at the forefront of that work. We have a lot of work to do, but I know that together we can get it done. Thanks to all of our incredible industry partners, we are steering forward a future that is brighter than we could have ever imagined. We should not see the pandemic as a setback, but as an opportunity to reimagine this industry to be greater than we ever thought was possible. Thank you so much for being here today, for all you do for travel and tourism. I'm happy to answer any questions, dig into any of these issues as deeply as you would like. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori. As always, just enlightening for sure. And it just goes to show you are one person that works in this industry, and why do we do this? We impact the communities, we impact the country that we live in, and so very proud to be part of the U.S. Travel Association family. Some of you did submit some questions, and so we're going to go through them. And Tori, we're going to go ahead and start with you. I think you have a question.
Sure. Do you foresee Chinese or Asian travel to the United States resuming to pre-COVID levels anytime soon, or do you feel Chinese travel in particular will be slow to rebound and may take several years? So I think part of the issue with the Asian countries, in particular with China, are the requirements when you go back to the country, right? So if you come here from China, you would have to go back and quarantine in a hotel for, I think it's 3 weeks before you can go on with your normal life. So part of the issue is going to be other governmental practices that we're seeing, and this doesn't just apply to China or other Asian countries, but there are other countries as well. So I do think it's going to be much slower to come back. I think there's also some legislation going through Congress to address some issues with China, and I think that we could ultimately see some retaliatory impacts of that. But we know what a lucrative and important market, that is. So, as it becomes probably a little bit more viable and rational, given their quarantine rules, we'll start to put a little bit more effort towards it.
Thank you. Question, given what we saw from the champagne effect of domestic recovery here in Central Florida, what are you anticipating we will see from the international guests? A similar impact or a more muted version? Well, first of all, keep drinking the champagne when it comes to domestic travel, because that is truly what we're going to see short term, right? We are anticipating in 2022, what is really going to help all of Central Florida is that domestic leisure market. So, I know at Visit Orlando, I'm sure at Experience Kissimmee, that is where a lot of our efforts are. However, I want to put an asterisk. If you look back at 2021, of course, Florida was open for business far before many of our comp set. Well, guess what? They're open now. So the competition for that tourism dollar just got more and more aggressive for 2022 because they now have more choices to travel even within the U.S. Talking about international travel, obviously we welcomed international travel back early. You talked about November, and we had a lot of great fanfare at MCO, at our wonderful international airport. The reality is that we are a top choice. Had an opportunity during November to go to the UK. We met with travel trade, we met with airlines, we met with media, and the great thing is Orlando was either the #1 choice of a destination or in their top 3. So I think for as far as our region, international travel, we are that choice, so we're set up for great success. But as you know, as a destination, it takes all segments, especially for Central Florida. We have our domestic leisure, we have our business, and we have our international. And we're going to see that in a step, kind of a step return of recovery. So, that domestic leisure is still that champagne to us, so let's toast to it. But this year, we're starting to see great signs as far as citywide business. We're still seeing some cancellations on in-house groups meeting. And then we do think international travel is still going to take a little bit longer. Again, we do hope, and we're being bullish about getting it back well before 2024. But it is going to be a little bit longer, but I think we're set up for great success.
And if I can just pop in real quick on that, because I do think one of the important things is on international in particular, is because we've had such layered restrictions, that's something at the national level that we're really advocating. We need to pull back some of the requirements to come into the U.S. Having the testing requirement and the vaccination requirement when a lot of other countries don't have that hurts us and it hurts our economy, and that's one of the things that we're working to convey to our government, that we really need to have a more open, level playing field.
And I think, when you think about some of those restrictions, a family of 4 coming over from the UK, and if they can't find a testing site very readily, or it's costing them $100 per person, that's $400 right off the top of their spend. So I think as a community, we've got to make sure that these locations are readily available also for our visitors, as well as trying to make sure that it's not cost prohibitive. When we look at the U.S. versus a lot of the other countries, they have free testing and right at the airport, which I know we also have, but we just have to make sure we're communicating to our guests how to make sure that whatever restrictions that they're under, if they come to Central Florida, that it'll be an easy way to get through it.
You want the next one? Or
I can go, or do you want to go? Okay. How can we enhance the U.S. travel experience throughout our states and destinations while not focusing on restrictions and limitations? I think that's, kind of what I just said, but I think that one of the challenges that we've had, and this is something at the association we've really focused on, is how do we make sure that states aren't having different restrictions, or, that we're eliminating a lot of the challenges to come into the U.S. Beyond the visa processing challenges that we're seeing, again, having this multi-layered way to come into the U.S. is not only cost prohibitive, but it's also confusing to the traveler, right? They don't know if you go to New York versus Florida versus Missouri, what are the requirements, what are the restrictions? And so we've really said we need one approach. The Floridian approach would be best in that case, but.
That's right. That's right.
Great, thanks, Tori. Next question. Have you noticed changes in how consumers and international consumers shop for their vacations? And what will their buying habits and behaviors be over the next year? Of course, we saw this pre-pandemic where, with all the increase in OTAs and the increase in availability of booking through different sites and different venues and things. But what we're seeing, I think, internationally, we just had Florida Huddle here in Tampa earlier this week, and I was over there talking to a lot of our key tour operators. And, a lot of our international visitors have reverted back to the tour operators in this short term right now, booking through tour operators, because they want that safety and security of knowing that that trip's protected if they have any issues or any problems or anything like that. But the booking window is all over the charts. They've got bookings that are coming in already for 2023, 2024, and then they've got, I talked to a UK tour operator, had a family of 6 that were booking 1 week out. They were coming in 1 week because they didn't want to book too far ahead, because they wanted to make sure there's, not another rash of a new strain coming out or something like that. So the booking window is right now all over the place. But the other interesting thing that we heard a lot from at Huddle this week was that, a lot of the tour operator companies, a lot of the big companies, have been they've been rebooking these trips. They didn't want to lose the business. So what we basically have is 2 years, 2020 and 2021, that they have pushed all of those bookings for instance, for the UK, pushed all those into summer of 2022. And so they're looking at, they need increased capacity. They're looking at increased inventory for this summer. So layer that on top of the champagne effect of the domestic. We're very hopeful that we're going to have a really great summer, and we're going to be able to see a lot more of our international visitors at the attractions in the hotels, and especially at the shopping malls and shopping retail outlets. So, things are looking good, but as we've all learned through this whole process the last 2 years, things can change in a minute and everything can turn on its head. But we're very hopeful that it's going to be a good year for international into Central Florida.
What are we doing to protect the travel industry and keep borders open? So I've kind of addressed that a little bit, but what I would say is I do think the engagement, right? So when it's so important to talk to the elected leaders that are here, to reach out to the members of Congress, to help them understand how important it is to really keep the economy open and keep it going. I mean, your local Congressman Soto, helped to lead a letter with a member of Congress from Michigan on the importance of visa processing and how critical it is to expedite what is currently, almost a year-long backlog. So, I think when you are advocating, as you do, to your local and elected leaders, we can see a good outcome where, we had, I think, 100 members of Congress out of 435 sign on to that letter that went to Secretary Blinken, the Secretary of State, and that means something. Like, that's meaningful. So continue to be engaged is important. From obviously from your standpoint, but that's something that we're really doing. We're advocating. Not only do we need to keep the borders on, we can't have any more travel bans. We need to have a consistent approach to what we do and what we say to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think if you want to touch on it, I know you spoke a little bit about it, but on the visa waiver programs, which, is really a trusted travel program, right? There's a lot of things that go on for a country to become a visa waiver program. But, I know one thing we talked about at lunch was, how can technology play a role? And there's battles, but there's discussions about the virtual. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, I think it's important to note 8 of the top 20 markets for the U.S. are not visa waiver program countries. So, 12 are, but that means that you don't have to apply. If you're a non-visa waiver program country, if you are a visa waiver program country, you don't have to apply for a visa. So it's much easier to come in and out of the United States. Our government needs to be working closely with governments like the Brazilian government to help allow for Brazil to be extended into the visa waiver program. That's something that will really help, because the more countries that are in the visa waiver program, that will also lessen the backlog. and it's really important. But I think we're also looking from a general visa processing standpoint at, how do we look at a pilot program that can do, video conferencing? How do we, biometrics are an important part of the whole travel facilitation standpoint, but for folks that need to renew a visa, if our government's already got your biometrics, then you should move to the front of the line. Let's get that paperwork processed. We don't need to have a face-to-face interview. And so it's really, thinking about innovative things like that. Now, there are some issues. The in-person interpretation by the State Department of the law is that you have to physically be in person. So we think if there's a way to validate your biometrics and you have a face-to-face via Zoom or whatever technology that we're also unfortunately familiar with now, that should, as long as we can validate your security, that should be an option. And so we're really pressing the State Department and Congress on those issues.
And following this, those that you are here, we'll send out also a link because U.S. Travel, they do a great job. I mean, you've heard how effective of a lobbyist Tori is and the U.S. Travel team, but there's nothing, whether it's local, state, or federal level, of them hearing from their constituents. And so if there is a need for action, I mean, they make it very easy. So we'll make sure, and if you want to sign up for their distribution when you get it, it's either a quick email, they help script your phone call, but the reality is that we are the industry and we need to take action, and they afford us that opportunity by staying ahead of a lot of these issues. Another question was, do you see a huge pickup trend for 2022 despite the new variants that is spreading? I'm going to make an assumption. We're talking about group business in this. And one of the interesting things, as each variant, because I think at the end of the day, we are in a fluid situation. We are living in a world of the pandemic, and there's always going to be, what is that next variant? But what we also are seeing through research is that while it may have travelers a little bit of pause, their behavior is they're still going for that trip. On the group side, what we've seen is, yes, there are groups, and whether it's citywides or in-house, every time that there is a peak with one of the variants, it definitely has a correlation to the attendance. However, like we've been having some meetings with some of the corporate groups that are coming into the community in the coming weeks, and they're actually seeing an increase of their attendance. So it's really interesting how it's all over the place. I would tell you probably a year ago, we were seeing about a 25% dip on their group blocks. We're definitely seeing, it's all over the place, but what we're seeing is they're booking their group room within 5 days. So, they may have opened registration in their housing block months and months in advance. Their booking window for a business meeting is shortening, and that's something that's very unusual for us. So, it's really dependent upon the type of group, what the association is, what the group is, whether or not it is impacting their bookings. So.
And I would just add one point, according to Longwoods, and this is the new data this week, and more to the, I think, probably domestic leisure, but a quarter of Americans are not even considering the regardless of the variant, but the pandemic at all anymore. It's not even factoring in. They're just, I'm going, it's not even a factor, which is huge progress.
And you can see, I think that's also like organizations like DT and mine that we serve, we've become even more important on the communication side because the rules of engagement changes all the time, whether it's within our theme parks, whether it's, within hotels. And so, it's important for us to communicate and stay on top of that so we can communicate it to our leisure visitors as well as our group customers that we work with.
So my question is, what happens when gas hits $4 and $5 per gallon and another $50 to $100 per plane ticket? What we've seen in the past, we looked at this many years ago during the recession of years past, and what we found was that a lot of people, they're not going to cancel their vacation. They've been dreaming about that vacation. They've been dreaming about that trip. So they're not going to cancel their vacation because it's going to cost them, an additional $20 to fill that car, or maybe 40 or 50, depending on how far they're driving. But what they might do is change their spending habit a little bit because they've spent more on plane tickets or they've spent more on gas, so maybe they don't spend as much in the destination. But what we're seeing right now is there's just so much pent-up demand where people have said, I haven't had a vacation in 2 years. We're going to go no matter what. If we have to spend an extra bit of money to fill the tank to get down there, or we're going to have to pay a little bit more for airline tickets, but we're still going to do it. So it may change some of their spending habits while in market, but we don't see that there's going to be a dramatic fall off in terms of visitation just because the price of gas goes up. I mean, it is very high, and if it goes up even higher, but people are just going to shift how they're budgeting for their vacations.
Well, and data shows that people have more in their savings, and one of the ways that they want to spend it is through his experiences. And so I think for now, price is not an issue. I mean, we saw in December our TDT collections one of the highest ever, and the reality is that's driven a lot by domestic leisure as well as the rate. And so right now, that what we are seeing is they want value. So even if it is higher in price, what is the value that they're given for that experience?
And we're the perfect destination because they want to reconnect. They want to be together. They want to do experiences together. And we're all about families and couples and reconnecting. And plus, we've been, as Tori said earlier, we never really did completely close down like some of our competition. But as Cassandra said as well, all of that competition is reopened or reopening. And so, we're going to have to work harder at it. But we think that we're in a very, very good spot moving forward.
Well, and we just celebrated National Plan for Vacation Day on January 25th, which was Tuesday. But a lot of the data that we put out also highlighted the fact that folks are burnt out, right? They need a vacation, they want a vacation, and I think now is the time to really, they're going to go.
One of the really interesting topics that came up at Huddle with some of the airlines and some of the tour operators was they're seeing the international travelers booking longer vacations because they haven't had one. So we're seeing Brits booking 2, and they were booking 3 weeks, but some of them are booking 3 and up to 4 weeks. And then interestingly enough, as you may know, with the Scandinavian and the Dutch market and that Central European market, they're very, very eco-minded. They're very eco-minded. And what we heard from a Dutch tour operator and also Scandinavian was that consumers are internationally from those markets are looking at how many vacations they're taking a year because they're very cognizant of their carbon footprint. And so they're taking longer vacations, but they're only taking like one long haul vacation a year instead of 2 or 3 because of the carbon footprint. So I really think, and Tori talked somewhat about it, but I think that sustainability is becoming an issue, and it's going to be a bigger and bigger issue facing the travel industry moving forward because we're hearing more and more of that type of thing.
And I think that's really why, as an industry, we need to be and will be looking at, how are we telling the narrative of what all we're doing as destinations, as hotels, as, airlines, as vehicle rental car companies, doing a lot of exploration into the EV market as well. How do we tell that story in a meaningful way that can also enable folks to understand that, to Ed Bastian's, point, you can see the world and save the world at the same time.
Right.
Another thing that we often talk about in that vein is that, we obviously know that we want our kids and grandkids to be able to see these destinations, but you can't necessarily know that you want to save the world if you don't see the world. So it's kind of chicken and the egg.
Very good. Do you have any other questions?
I do. I would like to hear any comments on future plans for international guests entering the U.S. Does the United States have any plans to drop the COVID test requirement? So obviously the UK just did that away with their pre-departure test and their quarantine rules, which is great. We have not heard yet that they are planning to eliminate the pre-departure test here, but it is something we've been having conversations with. We haven't, gotten sort of a signal either way, but I do think that as they look to potentially add a booster requirement and or a kind of regular cadence of the vaccine, that we could see a drop of the pre-departure test. So we're strongly advocating for that now, but don't have a timeline for it.
Very good. I think I do. Let's see. Nope, I think I'm good.
And you guys answered my question, so I'm off the hook.
What was that?
About technology.
Oh, yeah.
Tori pretty much covered that, but I just want to say, many of you may not be aware, but when the PPP first rolled out from the federal government, our organizations did not qualify. We did not qualify for PPP, and Tori and U.S. Travel made this the #1 priority on the agenda to get us to be able to qualify, to get Congress to qualify us for PPP. And I was on the phone with Tori on the weekends and at nights trying to, like, what are we doing? They were successful in pushing, and I truly believe that it was because of U.S. Travel's efforts that they were able to push to change the rules a little bit to allow us to qualify for PPP, and both organizations have received generous PPP amounts and also both of us have received our forgiveness letters, so we're good. But thank you to U.S. Travel, perfect example of how you guys work for us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I know we were going to also open it up if some of the conversation or things that Tori might have said, you may have additional questions. We have time. But before we do take your questions, I also want to thank our great host, SeaWorld Orlando, for hosting us in this beautiful space. Thank you for being such a great partner. Any other questions that you may have? We have microphones that can float. We see a hand up.
When can you tell the TSA to drop the mask requirement? 5, 6, 7 hours in a mask from the time you get in the airport at that end until you walk out the door here in Orlando. People are exhausted.
Yeah, good point.
What can you do?
Yeah, so, I believe that the mask mandate is in place through the end of March, or March 15th, I believe is the date. And, we've heard a lot of the CEOs in the industry articulate that it's time to do away with the mask requirement. Obviously, there have been a lot of challenges on board flights and things like that as well. So, I think that that's something that we continue to have a conversation with the federal government about. I think the biggest challenge that we face really holistically is that we're also pushing back against a vaccine requirement, because that has been popping up a lot, that there should be a vaccine requirement for domestic travel. And so I think in our view, the layered approach that's in place is better than having a vaccine requirement for domestic travel. So we're trying to thread the needle there with how do we eliminate some of these health practices in a way that doesn't cause some kind of, overactive response to it. So it's something that we're definitely paying attention to. I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but we're hoping that March 15th will be the end.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've been hearing that things are pretty closed in Canada. Have you heard about whether their borders are opening and what we can expect to see from our Canadian friends?
Yeah, so the Canadians have been, I think very back and forth, and sort of the land border versus the air borders have been a challenge both on our government side as well as the Canadian side. So the Canadians had been opening a little bit more, and then I think they closed down. They at least haven't reinstated the quarantine requirements that they had in place for quite a long time, which was very challenging. But we are continuing to stress that we need to follow the WHO sort of guidance, that we need a universal approach to travel. And so, we'll continue to talk. We talk to the Canadian government a lot, and we'll continue to do that, because I know obviously that's such an important market here. But at the end of the day, we're actively engaged primarily with our government, but we have been also talking to them about the importance of having a more open border.
And I would also add, so we see a weekly travel survey. And in Canada, the reality is there's still a lot of hesitancy from the travelers in Canada to even come into the U.S. And so, coupled with the restrictions, it's less likely. And so, we hope, because it's a huge market for us, right? But we're seeing that in the research that even the travelers, there's a lot of hesitancy. Anyone else?
There's one back there.
Thank you. I'm pretty loud, so I don't think I need the microphone. So I own and operate an eco-tour company, and we primarily do stand-up paddle tours on the Indian River Lagoon. And we're having a really big problem with pollution over there and eutrophication. Sure.
Yes, thank you. I'll absolutely take that. So we're going through a process called eutrophication, which is where the seagrass-based and vegetative-based ecosystem goes into an algae-based ecosystem. This happened to Lake Apopka. Environmentalists have been telling government agencies and elected officials since 1992 that the seagrass has been declining. Now we have a constant state of an algal bloom in the Indian River Lagoon. Now, most of this is the problem of chemical companies, and we're also seeing this in the springs because I don't know if the Bartow phospho gypsum stack had a sinkhole and dropped a whole bunch of radioactive water into our aquifer that's now going through the spring shed and coming up through the springs. So as people are wanting to recreate outdoors more because they feel safer doing that, our water quality is declining. All of our elected officials are turning their heads. They're saying that they're doing things, but it's not happening fast enough. It's not good enough, and they're not holding the polluters accountable. And as an eco-tour professional, there's a lot of professional courtesy in this industry. We are all very concerned about our lifeline. We have an unusual mortality event that has been declared on the manatees in the Indian River Lagoon. They are dying. They're pulling multiple dead manatees out per day. SeaWorld is absolutely overwhelmed. They just simply can't take anymore. They've done an amazing job. So we are just really concerned about how an FWC pays chemical companies by the gallon to spray herbicides directly into the waterways. And this is a fact, not a theory. So we're really concerned about this as a eco-tour industry, and we're wondering what we can do as a huge travel industry in general when people are going to be wanting to go outside, but we don't know how to save our waterways. What can we do? Can we, as a U.S. Travel Association, as a lobbyist, put pressure on the chemical companies who are running our municipalities?
So I know that there's a National Travel and Tourism Office at the Department of Commerce, and they are working on a national strategy for travel and tourism, and a component of that is in the environmental space. And I do know that water conservation and the impact of different environmental related issues is part of the work that they're doing. So I'm happy to follow up with you and give you some folks that you could reach out to over there, and we're happy to have that conversation as well.
I would absolutely love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for putting up with my passionate speech.
Love it. Any other questions? You see any more? Nope.
No, I was going to say, I think they want to start celebrating your year anniversary.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Tori.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your partnership, DT.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being here. Honestly, we do have a lot of challenges, but I do believe the future is bright, especially for Central Florida. And we would like to get you more active with the efforts of U.S. Travel Association, but look forward to networking with you in the back. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.